All right, by a show of hands. Miguel, you always do this. By a show of hands, who read the Torah portion this week? All right, a lot of hands. A lot of hands this week. That's great. So, this week's Torah portion is titled Korach, which comes from the first verse of the Torah portion in Numbers 16 that says, Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men. I'll continue with the next few verses. And they rose up before Moses with a certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown, and they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, Ye take too much upon you, and seeing all that the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them, wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. The story of Korah and the rebellion is one that we should actually be able to relate to. And I don't say that and you're probably like, no, Miguel, not me. I've never led a rebellion that led to the death of 15,000 people. So I don't know what you're talking about. So you're definitely right about that. But I think we often look at Korah like he's this villain, right? Like he's a villain in a movie. And when we do that, we easily can remove ourselves from saying, I'm nothing like that. But sometimes we need to look at characters like Korah in the Bible because we often can find traits in ourselves just like that. And the reason we have to identify them is because they are necessary for repentance, growth, and maturity in our lives and in our faith. So bear with me. Let's look at the timing of Korah's rebellion. So a couple of weeks ago during Torah portion Behalothka, I discussed how the Israelites began to seek complaints. Right? Numbers 11 verse 1 says, And when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it, and his anger was kindled. And the fire of the Lord burnt among them and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched. And who did they cry unto? Did they cry unto God? No, they cried unto Moses. But it was the Lord who gave the judgment unto the people, and despite the people witnessing God's judgment upon his people, even after all of that was done, even Moses' sister and brother brought accusations against him. And what happened to them? In Numbers 12, it says, And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. And the cloud departed from the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said unto Moses, Alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not this sin upon us, wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. Who does Aaron go to after this judgment? To God? No, to Moses. It was Moses that put this sin upon his sister. And last week, Joshua discussed the Torah portion, Shalach, about Israel's lack of faith. Because after the spies' report, they returned to their complaining, and to which the Lord said in Numbers 14, verses 11 and 12, How long will these people provoke me? And how long will it be there that they believe me for all the signs which I have showed among them? I will smite them with pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make thee a greater nation and mightier than they. He culminates this judgment in verses 22 and 23. Because of all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tempted me now these 10 times, and have not hearkened to my voice, surely they shall not see the land which I swear unto their fathers, neither shall any of them provoke me to see it. And what is their response to that? They mourn. They mourn. And then they get up early in the morning and they finally say, We'll do it. We'll go. We'll go up to the mountains to the place where God promised. But did they say that to the Lord? No, they said that to Moses. And Moses tries to intercede again for them and tell them, no, don't do that. You've missed your chance. But do they listen? No. And they go up, and what happened? They are smitten by their enemies. So now, after everything that has happened, basically the whole reason, bringing all of these people out of Egypt to come to the promised land, and they already know they're not going to enter, we come to the story of Korah, and we get this strange challenge to Moses. You take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then, lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. Why this challenge to Moses? Surely after everything that has happened in the Exodus, everything that has happened so far up to this point, Is it Moses and Aaron's fault? You can't blame Moses and Aaron for this. This is a losing battle here. Think about it. Imagine you've seen the miracles of God. You've seen his righteous anger. You've seen his wrath being dealt among the people. But you want to go after Moses and you want to go after Aaron? Why? This makes no sense. The fact that people keep crying unto Moses, when you look back at the last few portions, all the way until Moses has been accepted, ever since he accepted this role, they cry unto Moses and not unto God. And Moses has to intercede on their behalf. This reflects a faith issue where God is not at the center of their faith. There's a man at the center of their faith. And Moses is not God. But yet they go to him like he is one. There is this Egyptian mindset that is still within the people, despite God's best efforts to disprove there are no other gods. Something I'm going to talk about hopefully in the future when we get back to Passover again. But when you look at the plagues, right, that is God trying to prove that there are no other gods, right? In this ancient thought, right, of having a polytheist thought, right, God was trying to destroy that because they were saying, oh, well, the sun god rules during the day and the moon god rules during night. They're in competition with each other. Whoever's the strongest wins. And God is like, that's not how it works. There is one God. And I don't know how many times I have to try to show you that there is none else other than me. I mean, he put fire in hail, right? So if there's a God of fire and a God of ice, right? During Egypt, God is trying to show them that this isn't a competing thing, right? What you believe is false. So you have to understand that the timing of Korah and his rebellion reflects a very deep, deep sadness, which turns into rage. And rage is blinding. How many of you have ever felt rage before? You don't have to raise your hand. Okay? Willoughby's felt rage. I know. But if you've ever felt rage, and you'll know what rage is because there's no logic to it, right? Like when you have rage, like there's no stopping you from doing what you're going to do. And that's where Korah is at. The Israelites are now at the end of their rope. Their promise is gone. It's been passed on to their children. Korah is just the guy to lead this current rebellion. But so many other people followed it. And like Joshua spoke about last week, God was willing to deal with all of Israel's mistakes except for a lack of faith. And it's the lack of faith that leads to this sin. Unpardonable, so to speak. In God's judgment to separate those who can enter and those who cannot enter the promised land. We read these Torah portions for a reason, and they've been read for thousands of years. Why? So when Yeshua starts giving us parables and parallels, we can say, yeah, that makes sense, right? God can have judgment, and I could not enter. I could not receive this promise. It might get passed over me onto somebody else. So when you connect these last three Torah portions, you can see the Israelites move from denial to grief to mourning and to anger. So this takes me back to my original point. In times of despair, in times of great tribulation, how many times have we found ourselves blaming other people, blaming our spouses, blaming our parents, blaming our teachers, blaming our authorities, blaming our leaders? For what? For what surely God is doing in our life. I need you to hear that. Let me say it again. For what God is surely doing in our life. How many times have we been just like Korah in times of deep despair where we're blaming everything else and not accepting what it is that God is doing in our life? Does the Spirit not testify with our spirit that we are children of God? In Romans 8 it says, "And if children, heirs also, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, if we indeed suffer with Him, so that we may also be glorified with Him." You would think that after all of the suffering that the Israelites had gone through, all of the judgment that was poured, that they would get to this point that says, we are suffering for a reason. We are going through a fire, but when we come out of this fire, we're going to be in the promised land. We are going to be refined like gold. But it wasn't. And it was a heart issue. The issue with Korah and those who rebelled is that it's always easier to blame Moses for things, because then they wouldn't have to accept the fact that God was in control of their lives. If they could just get the man God put in charge to change, right? Then they could be in control of their lives. A selfish desire of power that reveals a lack of faith in the one true God. So listen, I'm not telling you that just because you have wrestled with God's will in your life, that you're just as bad as Korah. What I'm trying to tell you, that God is very, very, very patient with you. And that if you trust Him, you won't let depression and anger overcome you. Because when it overcomes you, you are not making any rational decision. You're definitely not making a spiritual decision. You're definitely not being led by God. And if you're not being led by the Spirit, you're being led by the enemy. So is it okay to be sad? Yes. Is it okay to be frustrated? Yes. Can you mourn and can you grieve? Yes. But don't let those things overcome you. Just because you don't know what's going on in your life doesn't mean God doesn't know. And we know that God causes all things to work together for the good to those who love Him, to those who are called according to His purpose. For those whom He foreknew, He also predestined to become conformed to the image of His Son, so that He would be the firstborn among many brethren. And those whom He predestined, He also called. And those whom He called, He also justified. And these whom He justified, He also glorified. And I pray that you know the Lord deep enough that you will allow Him to walk with you during difficult times. May you be conformed to His image, and may His peace be upon you. Don't let the sun set on your anger. Love your neighbor as yourself. And may you trust in God's plan for your life. You already have victory in Jesus Christ, our Lord.